Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today, we are joined by Josh Johnson, who serves as the Prevention and Outreach Manager at the Sexual Assault Center, where he oversees SafeBar, an evidence based training program that certifies bars, restaurants, and other alcohol serving establishments in reducing sexual assault through active bystander intervention and prevention strategies to help foster safer nightlife environments.
Hey, Josh, so great to have the opportunity to spend time with you. Obviously, I spent some time with Lorraine, so this is kind of a bookend discussion. But your background and role is a bit different. So, do you want to describe a little bit of your history and what your current role is?
Absolutely. Really good to be with you, Jim, and I appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Josh Johnson. I am in this work because I started as a clinical mental health therapist in Tennessee about 7 years ago, and through a lot of different treatment environments, my clientele that I ended up working with the most was survivors of sexual violence and trauma. Um, I work currently as the director of training and prevention at the Sexual Assault Center here in Nashville, Tennessee. And really, what brings me to this work is I've spent those 7 years working directly with those who are harmed by sexual assault. Uh, this opportunity came up, and I kind of jumped at it because it's of such a powerful and meaningful role to be on the healing side, working with survivors and victims of this prolific issue. Um, but the whole time, I think many therapists, including myself, find ourselves asking this question of like, how do we just make this problem better? Like, how do we decrease violence, not just be responsible for catching the fallout? So as director of training and prevention at the Sexual Assault Center, our job is to be out in the community, making the conversation around sexual assault just less and less avoidable, so that our community just grapples with it more and hopefully through that process figures out how to just become safer. And that's a work that I've become very, very passionate about and excited to talk about how SafeBar is a big part of that.
Mhm. So, can you describe more specifically what the mission of the Sexual Assault Center is and its objectives and how you've achieved those objectives?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, Sexual Assault Center's mission is to end sexual assault in Tennessee, and to support its survivors. We do that through a few different programs. We offer direct client care for survivors. That's through our outpatient therapy. That's through our advocacy department, where they're not therapists, they're not social workers, but where the therapy happens in the room. It's where the healing and the reprocessing of that trauma happens. Our advocates are walking with our clients in the environments, navigating the systemic resources in their communities that are intended to help them, getting them connected there. They also do a lot of court advocacy. Um, to make sure that a trauma-informed perspective exists within the legal cases of our clients who are trying to pursue some sort of legal justice around the violence that happened to them. Um, we also have some crisis support. We have a 24/7 hotline that's open, again, 24/7. And we have a safe clinic. We're able to offer free rape examinations and forensic examinations for anyone ages 16 and up, again, completely free of charge. It doesn't matter when this happened to you, how this happened to you, who you are. We are open and available to you, and our grant funding helps us do this again completely free, so that people don't even have to think through that. How do I afford help? Then there's us, the training and prevention team. Again, we're more external. We're more trying to be in the community, trying to shift cultural attitudes around the problem of sexual assault and sexual violence. trying to build capacity for other professionals that are working directly with clients and survivors, as well as bring prevention strategies, prevention recommendations to businesses that maybe they're not involved in the direct care of survivors, but um, they are a part of collectively working together to make this community safer. Again, that's kind of where SafeBar comes in. Um, we also do a lot of legislative advocacy around the problems of sexual violence. I can, by all means, go into detail on some of the bills that we've been involved in. But that goes to say that SAC is very intentional about making sure we're not just working with the fallout of violence and crime, but we're also trying to make systemic change so that happens less, that hopefully we put ourselves out of business one day.
Mm. Okay. Now, alcohol, I've been a counselor, myself, and also specifically around alcohol and alcoholism, but also I
Okay.
did do some work and set up a men's group, Men Against Violence Against Women, type of group in Massachusetts. So I do have some familiarity both working within the industry and then also just working as a counselor and also an advocate for awareness and education. But alcohol clearly is a part of a lot of things relating to domestic violence, over and above just sexual assault. So where in your sphere do you see alcohol as a factor in some of the situations that you come across?
So I think first things first, it's important to make sure we always start this conversation by emphasizing that alcohol does not obviously cause sexual assault. It's not being drunk that leads to someone being harmed. It is the specific choice of another person to harm someone else. Now, that being said, alcohol, it's commonly referred to accurately as it's the number one date rape drug. Um, there was a study that was done by Rain, Rainn, and where they did a toxicology study of like 1,000 drug facilitated sexual assaults. And 78% of them tested positive for at least one substance, and over 50% of that number ended up being alcohol. Um, and so the reason SafeBar exists is to make sure that prevention is happening where everybody gathers. And our goal is never to warn people about the dangers of alcohol. We're Nashville. We're known to be a bit of a destination city for bachelorette parties, bachelor parties. We want people to come here and fully enjoy themselves. Um, our job is to make sure that the alcohol serving establishments have the tools and resources and strategies in place to make sure that people can come to their place, enjoy themselves fully, close the night down, and be safe, be looked after. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, it ties into the next point I'd like to discuss. I mean, so from this perspective, then, how did SafeBar originate, and how do you see it as playing a role in the work that you're doing?
So SafeBar originated back in 2022. Lorraine McGuire, who I know you spoke to, is a huge voice in making sure that SafeBar took up the footprint that it needed to in a place like Nashville. Um, and I'll talk about a couple of things that she did that was very specifically helpful. Um, One is making sure that we actually develop some relationships with the local city government. And she did that by creating a task force that included our Office of Nightlife, that included the chief of police, all the people who are really stakeholders in the safety of our entertainment district. Um, and what we've seen positively is that as a result of really making sure that we're not just a one-off training opportunity for just a bar to take and kind of forget about, but that we're actually embedded in a part of the ecosystem of how the city is trying to make sure that the entertainment district as someplace safe to go to, is that helped us make sure that, frankly, the bars started to see themselves as a part of something bigger, as a part of, we are making Nashville a good place to come and have fun, which it is. Um, how we're seeing some change is we're not there to tell bars how to run their business. And when we hit some hesitancy, it's usually because the questions are, you kind of don't know what it's like to be a bartender on a Saturday night in downtown Nashville. We can't just be responsible for making for um uh everything that happens in a very, very crowded room. And our job is to be like, yeah, sure, absolutely. What we are here to do is just help inform and put some recommendations to your policies and procedures, and give you some strategies so that if something does happen in your bar, because you can't prevent something from happening, but if you can have the steps in place to make sure that your patrons you can connect them swiftly to help, that you can swiftly intervene when you do notice something, all that does is, one, it's great for business, just shows that like people want to hang out at your bar because they know they're going to be taken care of. But then two, again, it makes sure that that fear in the back of some of our community members' brains, especially women, who are just trying to enjoy their lives. That question of, um, "Am I safe here?" That starts to decrease a little bit, and people just get to have more fun. What we get to see is that the bars that we train are able to more quickly and efficiently document and get uh, patrons that have been harmed to the right people, whether that to be authorities, whether that to be a resource like us who can immediately help with treatment. Um, and that ultimately moves the needle the most because it makes sure that if harm happens, people aren't left alone, that they're not at a bar trying to figure this out for themselves, that the bars that we train have the procedures in place to make sure that people get swiftly to the help that they need.
Hmm. Well, you know, I'm working in the industry for so many years. Clearly, when you're interacting with young adults, particularly those under 25, you have, you know, a lot of those experiences when people go out is often based upon perceptions that they learned or they experienced when they were younger, or what they observe in movies, or what they see in TV, or what they learn on social media. Particularly today, you have so much kind of graphic demonstration of sexuality through pornography and other means, and that you have a whole new value set of people coming of age, particularly those that have been isolated during COVID,
Mm.
during those formative social years, you know, the 16 through 20, before they're legally able to go out and drink alcohol. But it's an opportunity where they learn how to develop friendships and love relationships and experience sexuality for the first time. So, how do you see interacting today with this young adult population, and how do you feel it's evolved or changed, or is it really just more of the same, that it's nothing new, it's just a different time period?
That's a really great question. I think I think something that we all have to grapple with is, it's not just that the ways that we related to each other, the ways that we socialized became a lot more virtual and isolated, but also the ways that we're consuming content that theoretically is telling me what's a good way to live my life. That's also happening in these virtual environments. And so as a result, it gets really siloed. We talk about echo chambers all the time. It's a big topic these days. And so I think part of what we're seeing is that, as opposed to, when I was young, when we were just kind of out and about, and that's kind of how it was, those social pressures, it was those tensions, it was those abrasions that kind of get smoothed out by being around people. That I kind of learned this is a good way to operate, where I can take care of my fellow peers, I can take care of myself, and also pursue like relationships that I enjoy that are good for me and vice versa, right? Um, but when that kind of learning happens just through a screen where a lot of my behavior can be really curated. If I'm like a content creator, I'm putting a lot of stuff out online that with a lot of claims about, hey, this is how the world works. This is how you as a man like should act and behave. There's no challenge to it. It's simply presented. And because I'm usually isolated in my room when I'm watching a YouTube, there's no challenge that I can then apply. And so I think what we see is that when people then take that step outside, they go to their clubs or go to the bars for the first time once it become legal drinking age, is that becomes the first time that that rubber hits the road. And so that can go one of two ways, or well, it can go a lot of ways, but two of those ways is either that young man in this instance realizes, oh, this doesn't really get me what I thought it would give me, and they kind of leave feeling maybe resentful and without a lot of support in their real life, then maybe they don't have a way to process, hey, why did that not work? At worst, harm gets perpetuated. Very harmful behaviors just get acted out because when I've consumed that kind of this is the way I should behave in a vacuum, again, not being just around people all the time doesn't give me the testing that you usually go through socially and developmentally to develop pro-social behaviors as opposed to antisocial or harmful behaviors.
Okay. Um, and in that way, what role do the people who work in the bars, clearly a lot of your work involves the person who, I'm sure it's primarily women, but I'm sure there are other groups that are sexually assaulted.
Mhm.
Um, but you have a very big focus on treatment and intervention and prevention, very much oriented to the woman. Uh, but how do you work with educating and orienting men who have gone through this kind of phase that you just spoke about, where they're confronted with reality, that the reality of social and sexual interaction is not the way they've heard it from their social media, but in fact, it's perhaps a little more daunting than they expected, and maybe they take a more aggressive approach. But how do you train people who work in bars to intervene with the man, and what steps are taken to um, make people understand the most proper way to behave?
So, as far as what we train the bars, it's important to make sure that when we train the bars that we like the highest priority for bars is to make sure that the person who feels unsafe that changes, that where they are taken care of, they can be moved to safety, um, or the environment becomes safer. So, what we train bar staff on is not just how do you recognize signs of like patterns of predatory behavior, from a potential assailant, but also how do you recognize like discomfort in someone who's being targeted? Because oftentimes that question comes up as like, our job is not to necessarily police all behavior. Absolutely. But we can also recognize this person is clearly uncomfortable in whatever conversation they're in. They're cornered in a way, either socially or physically, that none of us would feel comfortable in. And so we train them on like, for instance, the 5 Ds of active intervention, either distract or diffuse, or find these ways to diffuse the situation so that then the attention is brought away from the potential victim. And then that gives the bar staff an opportunity to step in. Hey, are you okay? Can we get you somewhere? Um, and so we really push making sure that we train how do you recognize behavior of being targeted, of that discomfort that people put off. That way, people it's less about how do you recognize that someone is going to be a bad actor, because that's harder. And that usually
Mhm.
takes the kind of training that security teams or law enforcement has. And that's why we also talk a lot about how make sure that we push, hey, collaboration with your security teams, us actually training bar security teams too, um, as a big part of this program, because then it's about the bar staff steps in, kind of does this active intervention. Let's try to get this person just away from the person that's making them uncomfortable. And then let's let the security know so that then they can go and figure out they need to take care of the person that's potentially assailant. Um, Now, you asked also about how do we also help men, young men, really anybody, also develop healthier models on how to just behave in these kind of environments. SAAC as a whole, something that we're actually still working on right now, sounds like something that similar to what you've been involved in the past, is building a program that's specifically for basically men, um, to have better collaborative conversations around how do we operate in the world? How does that help or not help this problem of um, sexual assault being prolific? Um, ideally it'd be a place where people can raise questions about like consent that are hard to understand in a vacuum, that I have questions about that could come across messy. And if I ask in the wrong room, I'm just going to get wrist slapped, where that can be asked and we can say, hey, we're going to take that question seriously. Let's actually work to answer it. And we can also call out maybe somewhere that question might come out of some prevailing attitudes that we're actively trying to dismantle. It's We're working on a program that will hopefully give that space for men to help each other learn the very things that we're talking about, so that it's not just coming through YouTube or TikTok, that is actually happening in some form of community where the topic is how do we as men play an important role in making sure that this becomes a less sexually violent world.
Well, this has been great. You have a whole continuum of services and future visions for what it is that you want to do and what you want to accomplish. And obviously, you're quite passionate about it. And you've personally experienced a lot of the trauma through your therapy, which motivated you to do this work. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support for the upcoming summit. It was very gracious of you to help be a sponsor. And then obviously we'll have not only you on a panel with police and fire and transportation, but also I spoke with Lorraine about working on doing kind of a workshop that might be much more specific to what the training looks like.
Perfect. That sounds great. I'm really happy to be there. Really appreciate the work that you all are doing and to support communities like ours and making sure that we can make our cities fun, enjoyable, and also just uh, good for everybody.
Mhm. All right. Well, I look forward to meeting you in person.
You too.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right.